Good afternoon to you. It is 4:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Mark Krikorian joins us. We talk immigration with him, as we so often do, as the Biden White House lies about the state of affairs in our country, and Democrat officials across the country are now panicking because it turns out being a sanctuary city wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And then Philip Lenjicki will be with us at 5:30 today as we talk about the influx of Chinese Communist Party influence in the United States and the role that Joe Biden's playing in all of that. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Let us see here. We've got a number of things I want to get to. Let's start with some calls. We've got Nick in Purcellville. We'll do Nick in Purcellville on line 4. Nick, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir.
I was trying, you're talking about the economy today. I was trying to find out the unemployment rate for the illegals in this country, and I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they claim that the unemployment rate for illegals is lower than that of native-born Americans. And last year they claimed it was 3.2% versus 3.5% for native-born Americans. No, I can't see that, and now these new unemployment statistics are saying that it's still around 3.6% now. They upgraded it to, and I can't, there's 100,000 people, illegals in New York City. You can't tell me that, what would that be, about 300 of them or 3,000 rather are working, and that they just come into this country and automatically they have work, and it's based on a monthly survey that they take, calling people, I guess. I don't see how, if we don't even know how many illegals are in this country, how could they come up with some kind of a statistic on it?
That's a good question. I mean, Nick, I'll be honest with you. I didn't realize that the Bureau of Labor Statistics had a specific illegal immigration line. I assume they call it like undocumented or something, but I wouldn't be surprised, of course, to know that they have immigration data, legal immigrants. But the idea that they're tracking illegal immigrant labor is news to me. But either way, one would have to assume that for someone to illegally immigrate to the country, that they must be going somewhere and generating some income, that they're taking some money. That's one of the reasons why they are here. And what you have is often, businesses that are linked up with the Democrats who are exploiting illegal immigration in order to, create their labor force and underpaying everyone. They're not even paying people at the minimum wage in order to do that, and exploiting all of these foreign nationals coming into the country.
Well, we've been told for years and years it was like 13 million illegals in this country.
I know.
And now what is it? Do they even know? So how could they, know what the unemployment rate is if we don't even know how many illegals are here?
We don't. And we live in a country of just over 300 million people. Occasionally I've heard estimates of somewhere around 30 million illegals on the high end being in the country. If that's the case, we're looking at 10% of the country composed of illegal immigrants. And that's the country that our leaders have created, both Republicans and Democrats for that matter, but now Democrats in the White House.
Yeah, it's I just don't understand it, and I wish we could get some more accurate figures.
I do too.
Counts. So do they count people when they come across the border, or is there some kind of counting mechanism? And how do we know? They don't know their names. Where are they disappearing to?
No. The reality is it's a black box, Nick. I mean, right now, we have some loose data. We have apprehensions. Those are people who turn themselves in and then make false asylum claims in many cases. We have people but they are illegal immigrants. If you cross the border illegally, you're an illegal immigrant, regardless of whether or not you make an asylum claim on this side. Additionally, we have gotaways, those people who are detected either by eyeballs or technology who've come across our border and then went into the country and didn't get taken into custody. And then finally, the third category are the people who are gotaways who weren't detected. And that number is just unknowable. We just can't know. So the answer to your question is no, we don't actually have a firm idea on how many are in the country.
Well, thanks for reporting on this. And I think you could do part of your show on the economy every day and you'll get a lot of interest.
Well, thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. We try to key in on these, and including on these days when they've got these big phony economic numbers coming out, or the numbers tell us a story that the White House certainly isn't telling us. Thank you, Nick, for that call. Let me take a phone call from Justin, Wilmington, North Carolina. Great Wilmington, North Carolina. Line 1, Justin. Hello.
Hey, Vince. Happy Friday. So while we're talking about illegal immigration and the economy at the same time, and I've heard you state before that you had an official economist there for your show or
yes.
the station, and I would still like to see an economist come out with a roundabout number of how much the illegal immigration will cost the U.S. taxpayers. And I want him to factor in the children and the fertility rate, both children present and future, times 12 years, average cost of public education, times the annual cost of medical. And I really think it would shock the population to find out that every one of them will cost the taxpayers $1 million.
There's a lot here. So to give you a sense, there is some economic data on the question you're asking. One of the group FAIR, which is an immigration research group, they have billed a number as of this year that illegal immigrants are costing us on net at least $150.7 billion, approximately $151 billion. They say they arrived at that number by subtracting tax revenue that's paid by illegals. That's just under $32 billion. And that includes not necessarily income tax, like sales tax and various taxes that are gathered along the way. They subtract that from the gross negative economic impact of illegal immigration, which is basically what you and I spend on illegal immigrants. That's about $182 billion. So the number that they're at is $150.7 billion. And that's the net cost of illegal immigration. So that's a big number
per year. Year. Well, I'm no economist, but I can do basic math, and 10 million illegal immigrants. When give a couple years for them to have some more children, and those children enter public education.
Of course.
And I think it'll be $500 billion a year, equaling $10 trillion over 25 years.
Yeah, and they say they say the numbers here are about 15.5 million. That's their estimate on illegal immigrants as of this year. But again, these are all kind of a shot in the dark. You make an educated guess here. They're a group that is much closer to this than we are on an average day.
It's an economic invasion as well as a criminal invasion, and this is going to last well beyond this current president.
Yes.
Future presidents, we're going to be paying for this for decades and generations. This is the most obscene economic assault on American taxpayers that they could possibly pull off.
And it's an assault on American workers too. It's an assault on American workers too. It undercuts American workers. It limits the wage potential of American workers nationwide. And so the long-term effects of this are very deep, and especially economically, Justin. Thank you very much. A smart call, Justin.
Thank you.
From Wilmington, North Carolina. Let me see here. There's some other craziness here. We'll talk more immigration coming up with Mark Krikorian. But there's some other craziness here that I'd like to address that can be kind of summarized today in a New York Times headline by a guy called Farhad Manju. Mr. Farhad says this today. His headline, Kia and Hyundai, the car companies, Korean car companies, helped enable a crime wave. They should pay for it. What does that mean? Kia and Hyundai helped enable a crime wave. What did they do? Exactly. They say, this is what Farhad says, according to the Council on Criminal Justice, the number of vehicle thefts during the first half of 2023 was 33.5% higher on average than during the same period in 2022, representing 23,974 more vehicle thefts in the cities that reported data. In Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Chicago, New Orleans, Buffalo, and Durham, North Carolina, motor vehicle thefts this year have more than doubled relative to last year, according to statistics collected by Jeff Asher, a crime data analyst. This week, the Baltimore Sun reported auto thefts are on pace to more than double the total from last year, as reports through the first 8 months of 2023 are already up 88% compared to all of 2022. Why are so many cars getting stolen? Farhad asks. Police departments and city officials point to this. Millions of Kias and Hyundais are ridiculously easy to steal. I see. So economical vehicles, Kia and Hyundais are cheaper cars by and large. I hear they're fairly reliable vehicles, but they're cheaper cars by and large, and more affordable, that is. And as a result, the claim that the left is making here is because they don't have all of the expensive anti-theft devices built into them, and they're so easy to steal. The reason car theft is going up is because Kias and Hyundais are too easy to steal. This is the short skirt theory of vehicle theft in the United States. It's the car's fault that it's being stolen. It's the vehicle manufacturer's fault that the vehicles are being stolen. It is not the fault of Democrat politicians, prosecutors. It's not their fault. It's not the fault of the people who are running these cities into the ground, aiding and abetting car theft, not giving consequences to any meaning to people who steal cars. And car theft, by the way, very violent in many cases, these carjackings. It's terrifying what people go through as they get their cars stolen from them. They're just easy to steal. That's the claim. Kias and Hyundais. And the New York Times, Mr. Forehead is not the first guy who said this. You've got, in recent weeks, the crazy Chicago mayor, Brandon Johnson, and, it's so crazy. Lori Lightfoot is not the mayor anymore. And a person who's just as crazy comes in, maybe crazier. This guy, Brandon Johnson, he announced recently that Chicago is suing Kia and Hyundai for, quote, their failure to include industry-standard engine immobilizers in multiple models of their vehicles. The impact of car theft on Chicago residents can be deeply destabilizing, particularly for low to middle-income workers who have fewer options for getting to work and taking care of families. The failure of Kia and Hyundai to install basic auto theft prevention technology in these models is sheer negligence, said Johnson in a statement. And as a result, a citywide and nationwide crime spree around automobile theft has been unfolding around our eyes. Amazing. So you blame two Korean car companies instead of the Democrats who are managing these cities. What do you think is going to happen if you can compel Kia and Hyundai to add engine immobilizing technology to their vehicles? What is the impact of that, would you say, Mr. Mayor? What would be the long-term effect of that? The answer to that is you would drive up the cost of those cars. You would price people out of affordable automobiles. That is actually what would happen. You would drive up the cost of vehicles and price low-income consumers out of being able to get access to those cars. So rather than do your job, the one that we're already paying for, the one that taxpayers are already forking over tons of cash for, where you make your city safe, where Democrats make all of these cities safer around the country, rather than do that, they instead point fingers at automobile manufacturers and say, those cars are being stolen because they're easy to steal. No, those cars are being stolen because you're letting theft run rampant. That's what's happening. Don't blame the cars. And why is it only cars? They've got, how many stories have you seen of CVS's across the country being ransacked, shampoo being stolen? And then what are you going to turn around? Oh, that shampoo's too easy to steal? Is that the explanation? I mean, how stupid can you get? This rationale, I should note, is also the same rationale they use to attack the gun manufacturers. Oh, because there are all sorts of murders in your city, Chicago, it's the gun manufacturer's fault. It's not the fault of the local officials who have failed their city, the lack of criminal enforcement, the lack of prosecutions. We keep hearing these stories. The go easy on people, dropping gun charges. Oh, he's a good boy. We should drop the gun charge. He'll come around. The epidemic of fatherlessness that the left has created in our country through both godlessness and through government subsidies to break up families. That's all genuinely happening. What do you think the effects of all of that are? So how do we fix it? We sue gun manufacturers and automobile makers? Come on. But that's the left's position today. So the New York Times, Mr. Forehead Manju, says that it's Kia and Hyundai who created a crime wave across the United States. It's the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, who says that it's time to sue the auto manufacturers. And it's always blame shifting. It's always, every single time, it's blame shifting. You know, rather than take responsibility for your own failures. We see this at the school level too, right? How many of these school boards are like, well, not enough kids are getting into this elite school that we manage. Fairfax County, right? Thomas Jefferson School of Science and Technology. Not enough kids are getting into this school, so let's lower the standards to let more in. I'm sorry. No. That's not the way this works. You are failing the children at lower levels. It is your job to both admit responsibility for your failures and then improve the quality of those schools on the lower end to make it so those kids are ready to get in at a high level at that school, rather than to lower the standards. But that's the way it always is. Shift the goalposts, shift the blame around. It's never my responsibility. I didn't screw this up. I didn't make things worse. I didn't cause more crime. I didn't allow that to happen. I didn't diminish the education here. It was somebody else's fault. And it's all projection. It was always your fault. It was always your fault. And it is. We're going to have to spend some time on this. Nancy Pelosi here in the last 24 hours saying this.
It's interesting to see how there's a certain element of the population who will just go for him. They're people we would probably never get. They don't share our values in terms of respect for the dignity and worth of every person and the rest.
Oh, my gosh, please. The woman who, she prays at the altar of abortion. I'm sure she really respects the value of every human person. It's so insane. But that's her mocking and insulting Trump supporters, saying that there is no chance that they would ever support her. And that is true, by the way, but for good reason. And she's not trying to win them over. She's not interested in appealing to those voters whatsoever. She's just cast them by the wayside. So with any luck, those voters will turn around and do the same thing to her party, cast them by the wayside. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. Reminds me of a bunch of other Democrats who've said something very similar to that. Mark Krikorian is just minutes away. We'll talk about the real state of illegal immigration in the country as Democrat after Democrat in all of these sanctuary cities starts to panic. Good afternoon to you. 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up 5:30, Philip Lenzicki joins us from the Daily Caller News Foundation with some new reporting on the ways in which the Chinese Communist Party is infiltrating the United States. And, of course, they're doing that to assist Joe Biden in his, quote, green agenda. A whole lot more on that coming up. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. And now a border update from the American Information Minister.
The charge from the Congresswoman that the White House hasn't taken up recommendations from fellow Democrats on how to deal with this issue more through executive action or otherwise because of concerns of how Republicans might react, you would say what?
I would say this. The president has done more to secure the border and to deal with this issue of immigration than anybody else. He really has. June saw the single largest month-to-month drop in unlawful border crossing because of the policies this president put in place. We've got a record number of federal agents and officers, more than 24,000, working to secure the border because of the funding this president secured. We brought 21 world leaders on the West Coast, as you all remember, together for the first time to deal with this issue in a regional way because of the alliances that this president has put forth, and we secured record funding for border security and management. And let's not forget, we've expanded the pathway to citizenship under this president. And mind you, he's been doing this on his own. Does he want to do it in a bipartisan way? Absolutely. That's why he put forth his first piece of legislation to be on immigration to fix this broken system. We are willing to work with Congress, with Republicans. We need Republicans to do this. We just do.
Huh. Wow. A lot of interesting stuff said there. Let's break it down with Mark Krikorian. He's the executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies, and he joins us now. Mark, good to have you with us, sir.
Glad to be here.
All right, so what I just heard her say, let's begin with the big headline. She claims Biden has done more to secure the border, to deal with this issue of immigration than anybody else. True or false?
False. I think she misread her notes. I think what they'd written down is he had done more to subvert the border than anyone else, and she just sort of read the notes wrong.
Generous of you. So it is just amazing, though, that she can stare at the media and us by extension with a straight face and say that the Biden administration is doing more than anyone ever has to secure the border. I mean, at this point, they'll say literally anything, won't they, Mark?
Yeah, I sure think so. In fact, I don't know. My sense is she isn't bright enough to follow this strategy, but I get a sense that they just figure they are free to say the most absurd, ludicrous, obviously untrue thing and basically dare you to disagree with them, at least dare the media to disagree with them. But the fact is that even the regime-friendly media are publicly now starting to say that this is baloney. This week, both the Washington Post and CBS News released information that, just underlines how much the border is falling apart. Washington Post got leaked numbers for August from the Border Patrol, showed a 30% increase in total illegal arrests by the Border Patrol, on top of a 30% increase in July. And about half of those people, about 6,000 illegal aliens a day on average, and about half of them were people bringing kids with them, the migrant family units, they call them. And the reason is that if you bring a kid with you, the odds are something like 90% that you're going to be just let go into the United States.
Yes.
So why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, a child is an easy pass into the country, and a lot of people are using them for that reason. And that has created a tremendous human trafficking problem too, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Because, some people, when they pay for a smuggler, they're getting what they paid for, and they pay their money, and they, get where they're going, and that's the end of it. But it often doesn't turn out that way, and ends up with exploitation. People are held in, debt servitude. People, in the worst case scenario, you end up with sex trafficking and what have you. So the idea that this administration is pursuing some humanitarian policy is ridiculous. The number of the number of deaths at the border, the amount of exploitation of illegal immigrants on their way here is also at record levels, along with and because of the record level of illegal immigration that this administration has essentially invited.
I saw that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did an interview with the New York Times in the past week, and she was asked about how the Biden administration is holding a lot more illegal immigrants in detention than the Trump administration ever did, and what is she going to do about it, and is she ever going to go to the border? And she expressed some gentle concern about it, but she's not going down to the border anymore and crying in front of a fence and acting like it's the most horrific thing she's ever seen, calling it a concentration camp. We're not getting any performances this week. Mark, what do you think that is?
Well, of course not, because this was all just about politics. If Trump did it, it was bad. If Obama or Biden did it, it wasn't bad. And the fact is that even folks like AOC and other people on the, really hard left, they know that this administration isn't, tough on immigration. In fact, to the degree that they complain about what the administration is doing, or you're detaining too many people, or ankle monitors are inhumane, that's the latest thing. It's just to make sure that just to keep pressure on the administration. You know what I mean? So that they weaken border control even more, and they aren't tempted to tighten up.
Yeah,
because of political reasons. So I mean, AOC knows this is BS, and so she's it's all part of a political strategy.
I want to go back to something Karine Jean Pierre said a moment ago too in that audio I played that I thought was really interesting. She said that Biden has been working hard to and has already, quote, expanded the pathway to citizenship. She said, for many of the illegal immigrants pouring into our country. What that means in practical terms, in very real terms, is Biden is granting amnesty to broad categories of foreign nationals. And ultimately, if you're given some sort of legal status in the country, that puts you on the track towards citizenship and voting in our elections in the future, doesn't it?
Well, yes and no. The fact is that the White House press secretary really isn't the brightest bulb in the marquee. And the fact is the administration has not put people on any formal path to citizenship. She's just using that because it's a cliche phrase that, that they're supposed to say. What they have done is given some kind of work permits or other ability to live here to an unprecedented number of people illegally outside the immigration law. During this administration, so we're talking 2.5 plus years now, they have let into the country, taken into custody, and then released into the U.S. close to 3 million illegal aliens. Those people, some of them have work permits, some of them don't, but they're here forever. And so if there is a path to citizenship, it's basically that Democrats in a few years, especially when there's a Republican administration, are going to start demanding that they all get green cards as well.
Yes, and a green card is the start. The green card is the start of that chain of events.
A real path to citizenship, exactly. So yeah, I mean, it's this is, she's saying the president has done this on his own, and he really wanted Congress to come along with him. He doesn't have any right to do this. The law requires that an illegal border crosser or a person who comes to a legal crossing but has no right to come in, that person be detained until their case is over. And yet they've released almost 3 million people now into the United States illegally. This guy is running a shadow immigration system. And, Karine Jean Pierre basically just admitted it, but says that that's a good thing.
And Mark Krikorian, when they do talk about this to the extent that they're forced to, they often say that what we need is a legislative solution and Republicans aren't playing ball, so the problem continues. But that's all one gigantic euphemism for we want amnesty for illegal immigrants in the United States, isn't it?
Absolutely it is. Well, in fact, it's more than that. They're saying we aren't going to enforce the law until you give us amnesty, and then there's no illegal aliens, so there's no law to enforce anymore.
Right.
They're holding enforcement of the law hostage to their demand for amnesty. And that bill that she referred to, she said, the president's first legislative proposal, that would have given amnesty to every illegal immigrant who had entered the United States before 3 weeks before the bill was introduced. And in addition to dramatically increasing legal immigration, and didn't even have pretend enforcement provisions in it, like some of these earlier amnesty bills did.
And also the idea that you could establish that somebody was actually in the country prior to the Biden administration and didn't come in after is preposterous. I mean, the whole illegal immigration industry is predicated on falsified documents.
Yeah, and as we saw when this happened, the last big amnesty we had was 1986, and a huge share of those people were using fake documents. There was a whole section of that amnesty under President Reagan where farm workers got amnesty. And it was so riddled with fraud, people got green cards even though they claimed that they had dug cherries out of the ground as their farm work, or they had picked watermelons off of trees. I swear to God, these people got green cards.
Oh my gosh.
So I mean, it would happen again, obviously. But the point is, we shouldn't even be having that discussion. How can you even bring that up until you achieve control over the border first?
Yes, absolutely. I'm looking at a number of headlines. Democrats across the country, these are now state and local Democrats, who are panicking about the state of illegal immigration in the country because now it's affecting them. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey has activated the National Guard to assist in emergency shelters housing illegal immigrants in her state. Now they're complaining that Texas has moved too many of these illegals to Massachusetts. New York also panicking. New York Times headline this week: as migrant crisis worsens, New York leaders pressure Biden to do more. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy suggesting just yesterday that his state can't handle any more illegal immigrants into his state. What do you make of all these Democrats who, if I remember correctly, were all saying that they were sanctuary cities and states before? Now, not so much.
Yeah, it's all fun and games until the illegal aliens start showing up in your community. Back in the 60s, they used to say that a conservative was a liberal who got mugged. Well, it's sort of a similar thing here. All these sanctuary jurisdictions are getting mugged by reality. And, they're using Texas and Governor Abbott as sort of a punching bag. But even, let's say, in New York, the vast majority of this latest wave of illegal aliens from Biden's border crisis who've gone to New York have not been bussed by Texas. They've just gone to New York because it's a sanctuary city and, it's New York. And, if you're a foreigner, the one place you'll know in the United States is New York. You know what I mean? So this is a problem of their own creation. And up to now, pretty much all the demands from these blue state politicians have been for more money. Give us more money, more taxpayer money to, cover the costs. What they need to start doing, and Mayor Adams of New York has sort of started to tiptoe in that direction, is say, you need to change your immigration policies so that these people don't show up here in the first place. Fix the problem.
Yes.
Don't just give us money to mop up the problem because it's never going to be enough.
One of the central complaints that Phil Murphy has here is that the Biden administration is reportedly considering relocating illegals from New York City to Atlantic City International Airport. The airport is one of 11 federal sites, Politico reports, that the Biden administration has sent to the New York City mayor's office that are under consideration. So do I understand this correctly? The Biden administration is planning on building encampments for illegal foreign nationals all over the country?
That's what it seems like. I mean, why don't they just do it at the border, have detention facilities, set up the tent, buildings? They can do that. They've done it in some places. And hold them in detention and make clear that they're not going to be let go if they make some bogus asylum claim. Instead, they're building basically Bidenvilles around the country. And that's not going to solve anything. It's basically they're responding to whoever is complaining first and loudest. Mayor Adams is saying, oh my God, I can't handle this. So they're saying, okay, well, we'll move them to New Jersey. And now the governor of New Jersey is saying, wait a minute. Don't bring them to my state. This is, NIMBYism, not in my backyard, on steroids. And why don't they all just say, okay, we need to shut the border down so that nobody has this problem?
So what's the answer to why they aren't doing that? Like, I mean, at some point when the dam is breaking like it is right now with all these high-profile Democrat officials across the country, you have to say, okay, we've got to do this. Are they that wedded to not admitting defeat on this subject, or are they that invested in what they think the long-term gains of illegal immigration will be for the Democrats? What is it?
Yeah, I don't think it's either one of those. I mean, maybe part of those two things are what it is, but the main thing is ideological. It is now a litmus test issue, like abortion, that limits on immigration are immoral. The immigration law itself is seen as equivalent of Jim Crow in basically mainstream Democratic officialdom. And so they see, back in 1980, I'm again going even further back, Jimmy Carter had a migration problem called the Mario boat lift.
Yes.
120,000 Cubans showed up overnight in Florida at Carter's invitation. And he was like, oh my God, this is a disaster. I have to do something. He was able to backtrack and do a 180 because the Democratic Party hadn't become the anti-borders party yet. He had flexibility, political flexibility. They can't now. Remember, in 2016, they were all running for in the primary. They all raised their hand, give illegal aliens Medicaid. They all raised their hand when they wanted to end border crossing being a crime. So what could Biden do, even if he wanted to? I'm not sure he even knows what's going on, but putting that aside,
yes,
even if they wanted to change because of the political problems it's causing them, I don't think they have the political room to do it.
And the politics of this used to be, at least for Democrats, the simple-minded answer was they thought they were appealing to Hispanic voters by being this permissive of illegal immigration. And the reality, it turns out, was that Hispanic Americans hate this. They are turning in record numbers towards Republicans now. And lastly, if this is ideological, this is the rotten fruit of constantly crapping on our country and saying it doesn't deserve good things, and that it barely deserves a border, and that we just have this awful history. Eventually, you come to the conclusion that we don't deserve to protect ourselves and have sovereignty, and that's where they are.
That is literally where they are. They do not think the American people have the right to say no to somebody who wants to come here. That is now a bedrock, non-negotiable principle. Not among Democratic voters necessarily, but among anybody who wants to get anywhere in Democratic politics. And that is not something you can split the difference with. There's no compromise there. You could compromise with regular liberal Democrats and say, okay, well, we'll have a little bit of amnesty and a little bit of this, and we'll each get something and split the difference.
Yep.
You can't split the difference when they do not believe America has a right to have borders.
No.
How do you compromise with that?
No, even Bernie Sanders sold out on this. He was one of the last ones to do it. All right, Mark Krikorian, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you today, sir. I was talking earlier in the program about how the media think that they're just going to be able to lie and never be held accountable through all of these many, just completely fabricated scandals over and over and over again. But it turns out there is some accountability out there. There is a Washington Post columnist who just subjected himself to what he thought would be a light conversation, a podcast interview with an owner of a comedy club in New York. And the two of them are sitting down, and the comedy club owner decided to ask a bunch of real questions about this Washington Post columnist's past coverage and failure to cover actual Biden scandals. And the ending of this interview is spectacular. The Washington Post guy storms out of the room because he doesn't have any good answers. He doesn't look. If you were a real journalist and you were confronted with like, hey, this is a compelling piece of information, what should we make of it? You'd sit there and you'd think it through too. You'd be like, actually, that's really provocative. Man, somebody should ask a question about this. But instead, this fella just instantly reverts to, I don't want to talk about that. I'm not talking about that. He sounds like Karine Jean Pierre because functionally he's got the same job. I'm going to play some audio for you coming up, and you'll enjoy it. I'm sure of that. That's ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show.